Okay, so I need to talk to you about something, because I have been sitting with this question for a while now. And then finally I think I have the honest answer. Is Sparking Zero actually better than Budokai Tenkaichi 3? And look, I know, the moment you hear that question, something in your brain already has an answer. BT3 is a classic, BT3 is the game, we grew up with BT3. But here's the thing, I went back and played both, back to back. Like, actual hours in both games. And the question that kept coming back to me the whole time was, did we actually hype the BT3 because it's better? Or because it was ours? Because those are two very different things. And I think most people have never actually stopped to separate them. So let's do that today. No hype, no dissertation, just what I actually found. Let me start with something that I think get lost in these comparisons. Before you look at the graphics, before you count characters, before any of that. How does the game feel when you're playing it? Because I think this is actually where people's opinions beat the hardest. BT3 had this very specific feeling. Everything was deliberate. Every punch felt like it had a purpose. You charge your ki, you wait for the right moment, you read your opponent, and then you commit. There was almost a rhythm to it, like a dance that could turn into a brawl at any second. I remember being a teen and figuring out the timing for the first time. Like, okay, now. And it worked, and it felt great. The beam struggles were genuinely tense. You're sitting there mashing the button, your controller is vibrating out of your hands, and for a second you actually don't know who is going to win. That's a feeling, that's a real feeling that BT3 gave to you. Now, Sparking Zero is a completely different conversation. The first time I jumped into SZ, I'm not gonna lie, I was lost. Everything moved faster, way faster. There's this mechanic called the burst, where you can close the entire distance between you and your opponent in a half second. You blink, and there you are already on top of you. And at first I thought, okay, this is just a chaos. Speed for the sake of speed. But then I start to actually get it. And here's what I realized. Movement in SZ isn't just about moving, it's about managing our momentum. Because if you misread the Z burst, if you commit cross in the arena, and your opponent isn't where you thought that would be, you are wide open. You just burned one of your most important tools, and now you stand there, like you made a mistake. Because you did. That's what makes the movement the biggest barrier to entering this game. It isn't hard to do, it's hard to time, because Z-Burst isn't just a dash, it's a decision, and the game punishes you for making the wrong one. Once that clicked for me, the whole game opened up, because I stopped thinking about it like it's BT3, where you wait and react, and start to think about it a moment management. Who is in control of the pace right now? Who's on the back foot? That's a real game inside the SZ. And when you play it that way, when it all starts making sense, it feels like those fights from the enemy. Not just inspired by them. Like, that's the same thing. BT3 gives you the strategy, rhythmic Dragon Ball. SZ gives you that fast, chaotic, no one can keep up Dragon Ball. They are not competing, they are showing you two different parts of the same universe. Alright, I need to be upfront about this section. This isn't a fair fight. And I say that with full respect to BT3, but the comparison just wild when you put them next to each other. BT3 came out in 2007 in PS2, and for 2007 it looked incredible. The cel-shaded art style, the way characters look like they came straight out of the manga. It had a real charm, an environment very clean and colorful. But here's the thing about those environments. In BT3 the stage is basically a wallpaper. It is there, it looks good, and it does absolutely nothing. You fight in front of it. When the fight is over, the arena looks like exactly the same as when you started. Nothing remembers that a fight happened there. SZ Flip that completely. In SZ, the environment destruction is an actual system. When you slam someone into the ground stays cracked. When a key blast hits the building, that building doesn't disappear, it falls apart in pieces with real physics. And the longer the fight goes, the more the whole map starts to bleed. That's the best word I have for it. The arena bleeds, craters open up, craters that were red that get bigger, the structure around you slowly deteriorate. By the end of a long fight, you look around, and you can almost read the whole battle just from the damage on the map. Every major exchange left a mark. And there's their lighting. When two characters are going out, their whole environment reacts. The sky shifts colors based on the key output. When UI Goku is fully powered, the light around the entire arena changes. The game is telling you how much power is being released right now. Not just through the character models, through the everything. BT3 understood Dragon Ball. SZ understands what Dragon Ball does to the world around it. And then there are the cinematic fights, when certain characters clash under certain conditions. SZ shifts into these full animated, fully voiced cinematic sequences that honestly look better than some of the actual anime moments. Gogeta vs Broly. I watched that sequence 4 times. Not to study, just because I literally could not stop looking at it. BT3 looked like an incredible Dragon Ball game. SZ looks like a Dragon Ball movie that you get to play. Those are very different things. Okay, Rooster. This is where BT3 built its legends, and it still deserves every bit of credit for it. 161 characters on PS2 in 2007. And not just the main cast, BT3 had everyone. Characters you forgot existed. Move villains who had 40 minutes of screen time total. Early Z fighters who barely get mentioned anymore. Forms and transformation you didn't even know were included, until you stumbled across them. There was something magical about that, like treasure hunting inside a character selection screen. You had just go, wait, this character is in here? And you had spent 20 minutes trying to everyone out. The sense of discovery built a love for the game that lasted nearly 20 years. People are still playing BT3 today. That doesn't happen by accident. XZ followed the tradition and pushed it further. Over 180 characters at launch. The entire Dragon Ball Super arc are included. UI Goku, Goku Black, Beerus, Broly. Characters BT3 couldn't have because Dragon Ball Super simply didn't exist yet. But here's the part I actually want to stop on, because I think it's the most underrated thing about SZ Rooster. Every single character feels genuinely different. Frieza floats. There's this elegance to how he moves, until it isn't elegant anymore, and it's just violence. Bills moves like they genuinely cannot be bordered. Lazy, almost bored. And then when he commits, it's terrifying, because you realize the whole time he was just choosing not to. Broly is a wall. He runs through you. Your options are move or take the damage. That's character design that respects the lore, not just the stats, but the personality. And the ultimate attacks. This is where BT3 and SZ really shows the generation gap. In BT3, ultimate attacks were fast. They were satisfying, they looked good for their time. They got the job done. But they were quickie. You had to see the animation, and then you back in the fight. Boom, next. In SZ, when you use a Spirit Bomb for example, the energy gets pulled from the environment around you. The music changes, and the cinematic camera kicks in, and the time basically stops to show you the scale of what's happening. That's the big difference. BT3 showed you the attack. SZ stopped the road to make sure you understand the weight of the attack. The camera is doing storytelling. It's pulling back to show how massive this thing is, how much it's cost. Why Goku only used this as an absolute last resort. And it's not just the Spirit Bomb. Every major ultimate in SZ has its treatment. The cinematic camera isn't decoration. It's the game saying, pause for a second because this matters. BT3 had rooster depth. SZ has booster depth and it makes every character feels like the version from the anime, not just a fighter in a video game. Okay, I have been pretty positive about SZ, so I need to be fair here, because no nostalgia, just facts, goes both ways. If I'm gonna be honest about BT3's age, I have to be honest about SZ problems too. Here's what I actually run into. The learning curve is steep, like genuinely steep. If you never played BT3 much and you're coming into SZ fresh, you are going to have a rough first few hours. The mechanics are layered: Z-bursts, vanishing attacks, perception dodge window, skill count management, counter timing. There's a lot happening at the same time. And unlike BT3 where you could pick up and just play, SZ asks you to invest time before it starts giving back. That's not a deal breaker, but it's real. And it's worth knowing going in. The camera is a problem. In fast, close range fights, especially against characters like Goku or Gohan who move constantly, the camera just can't keep up. You lose your opponent, mid-combo, mid-exchange, your character is fighting someone the camera can't show you properly. BT3 never had this issue because the movement speed was something the camera could handle. SZ outpaced its own camera. That's a real design flaw, not a small nitpick, it needs a patch. And DLC balance is worth talking about. The base game is complete. I want to be clear about that. You can buy SZ and play for hundreds of hours and have a great time without spending another dollar. That's true. But certain DLC and Ultimate Edition characters are operating at a different level than the base roster. If you go online, you will run into them. And if you are playing a base game character against some of these picks, you're already starting at disadvantage. Not impossible to win, but a real gap that exists. I'm not saying don't buy the DLC, I'm saying know what you're signing up for. BT3 had its own problem too, by the way. The online was barely functional. Some of those 161 characters were basically copy-paste of each other with slightly different stats, and single-player AI got predictable pretty fast once you learned a few patterns. The question is always whether the strengths makes up for them. Okay, so here's where I actually land on this. Budokai Tenkaichi 3 is one of the most important Dragon Ball games ever made, and I mean that with completely sincerity. In 2007, the game looked at the same entire Dragon Ball universe and said, all of it goes in. Every character, every transformation, every moment, and put it off on PS2. That kind of ambition is hard. The community it built, people are still playing that game nearly 20 years later. You don't get the kind of loyalty from a bad game. You get it from a game that made people feel something real. BT3 will always have that. Nothing takes it away. But Sparking Zero is not trying to be BT3, it's trying to be what BT3 would have been. If the same team made it today with PS5 hardware and Unreal Engine 5 and 15 more years of Dragon Ball story to work with. And when you look at it that way, SZ is the answer. The movement's closer to how Dragon Ball actually looks, the visuals are genuinely cinematic. The roster is bigger and the characters feel more distinct from each other. The ultimate attacks feel like the moment they're based on, not just animations. Yes, the camera needs work. Yes, the learning curve is real. Yes, keep an eye on the DLC balance. But if someone asks me right now, what's the best Dragon Ball game I can play? I'm telling them, Sparking Zero. No hesitation. BT3 showed us what Dragon Ball game could be. SZ is what Dragon Ball game is now. And honestly, that's not a bad place to be. That's where I'm at. And look, I know it's kind of topic where everyone has an opinion, and honestly, that's the best part. Maybe you think BT3 still has something that SZ can touch. Maybe you think I went too easy on XZ problems. Maybe you think there's a road section I missed. Drop in the comments. Genuinely, I read them. I reply to the ones that bring a real argument. See you in the next one.